everybody, and welcome to DFS Live here on Optimus Fantasy Football on YouTube. It is Friday, November 29th, 2024, Black Friday, the day after Thanksgiving. Mike, I'm stuffed still from yesterday.
Oh, me too. And I've eaten so much apple pie. I'm probably going to be rolling myself to the grocery store later because I have to buy some stuff.
My in-laws had a neighbor over for Thanksgiving. He doesn't really have any family left. His wife has passed away. Ray, phenomenal man, brought over boxes of treats from one of my favorite Italian delis I used to go to in high school for lunch. Cannolis, eclairs, biscotti, and just I ate a ton of food, and then he brought out that box. Plus, we had pecan pie and we had pumpkin pie, and I'm still working off the dessert portion of it at least.
It was
just too good.
Really, yeah, I ate way too much. I always do on Thanksgiving. I mean, I think you can tell by looking at this fat face, right?
My pants are not fitting well today. It's going to be a couple weeks before I get back to it. We've got Toronto Dave Mike in the chat popping out there with the party emoji. Dave, it is wonderful to see you. Speaking of parties, we have got a whole week of week 13 DFS to talk about, Mike. We've got some updated graphics. I want to get to them because I love them. Main slate quarterbacks this week. A little bit shorter, smaller of a sample size this week. We've only got 10 games in the main slate, as we've got a game going on right this second as we're live. We had the 3 games yesterday. We've got Sunday night, Monday night. Limited sample here, but there's still some really good plays. We're going to start at quarterback. My high pick for this week is Jalen Hurts. He is $7,700 on DraftKings, $9,200 on FanDuel. They're up against Baltimore, Mike. They have had an awful time stopping quarterbacks.
Horrible time. They give up the 5th most fantasy points to opposing teams' quarterbacks.
Yep.
Hurts has had multiple touchdowns in 5 out of the last 7 games. It's the past 2 where he's only had 1 in each game. I think this is a big-time bounce-back spot for him myself as well. Quarterbacks average 297 yards passing against the Ravens.
Yeah.
And 2 touchdowns in total per week. So, yeah, I love that call.
But he's the most expensive quarterback on the slate this week, and I'm 3rd most expensive on DraftKings. I'm okay with spending way up, and I've got a stack option for him when we get to wide receiver that I think I've worked into a couple of lineups with success this week. So,
that's good. I know who that is too.
Oh, I think we all know who it is, but we'll get there here in a minute. But first, my mid pick for this week is Baker Mayfield of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They're up against Carolina. He's $6,600 on DraftKings, $8,500 on FanDuel. Mike, for me, this is just matchup. Carolina, I think they're at the bottom of points allowed to the quarterback position. They're at the bottom of points allowed to pretty much every position right now in fantasy.
Yeah, and Baker defense is bad, real bad, all the way around. Yeah,
I have Baker Mayfield as my QB5 in fantasy this week.
I'm playing him all over the place in redraft and DFS myself. Yeah. He's the overall quarterback 5 on the season too, by the way. Evans is back in full health. The butcher, the baker, the fantasy points maker, Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, 100%. And it's $6,600 on DraftKings. I mean, that's a really nice discount for a mid quarterback. Now our low quarterback, almost a full 1,000 under him, 5.6K there on DraftKings, 7,900 on FanDuel. Justin Herbert has had a resurgence, Mike. He's playing much better than he did the first half of this season.
Just tearing it up as of late, right? They started passing the ball more. They have a situation where their J.K. Dobbins is out as well, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, I'm sorry. I know there's a lot of Gus Bus fanatics out there. I'm not really completely sold on Gus carrying the load. I think they're going to pass more this week. Again, I thought this was a great call by you when I looked it up in the sheet. I liked it.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah, he's going to hyper target McConkey. Will Dissly is a guy that I really like in DFS this week, even though he's not.
McConkey. Yeah, it's
Yes, phenomenal for McConkey. So Justin Herbert's a smash, and McConkey's probably a good stack option here. I don't have him on my list. But now let's move on to the running backs for this Week 13 main slate, Mike. Let's start with your first pick here is Joe Mixon, 8,000 on DraftKings, 9,500 on FanDuel. Houston this week. Look, Joe Mixon is their offense at this point.
Joe Mixon has just been fantastic this season. When he was with the Bengals, I used to use the hashtag never Mixon all the time. And it was mostly because people thought he was going to be a top 3 running back or a top 5 running back. And he cracked the top 10 like once there. He was a running back 2. He's a running back 1 now. And the Jaguars give up 103 yards rushing and 6 receptions for 49 yards every week to running backs. They're not good. They give up the second most fantasy points to running backs in total, right? So this should be a big Joe Mixon week, I think. Really big week for him.
Well, so Jacksonville's giving up 26.1 half PPR points to the position. Who else is going to accumulate those points for Houston? Dameon Pierce maybe gets a few carries. Maybe he breaks off a run, but for the most part, that's going to be Mixon's points.
It's all him. I didn't go look at snap counts, but it's going to be all him because every game he's in, it's been all him. He's just been such a stud this year. Happy to see it. It's really good.
Now I love your. Oh. Yes, in redraft, if you've got Joe Mixon, and I was yelling this off season, he's going to be phenomenal in Houston. You guys needed to go grab him, and he was slipping in drafts, and I like where I got him. He's paid off really well. Yep. Your mid pick, Mike, I really like Chuba Hubbard, Carolina up against
Buccaneers.
Oh, sorry, up against Tampa Bay. Again, this is a situation where I think Chuba's going to be the majority of their offense in this game. $6,700 on DraftKings, $7,400 on FanDuel.
He's had a nice run the past 3 games too. He has at least 1 touchdown in each of those games. He is another guy who has been essentially pretty much solid all season long.
Yep.
Chuba Hubbard, he's only 6,700 on DraftKings, 7,400 on FanDuel. The Buccaneers are bottom 10 defense against running back. It's just set up nice. Jonathan Brooks is not going to take anything from him this week.
Yep.
So
now for your low pick, we're hammering the other side of this game. Bucky Irving, $5,800 on DraftKings, $7,200 on FanDuel. But dude, Bucky Irving's good. Really, really good. If Rachaad White's not in that offense, he might be a top 5 guy right now.
Rachaad White's not a bad play either this week. Bucky has double-digit fantasy scores in 5 out of the last 6 games. 15 different running backs have scored in double digits against the Panthers this season. That's why I kind of like both of the Tampa Bay running backs this week. They give up the most fantasy points to running backs, the Panthers do. So he's 5,800 on DraftKings and 7,200 on FanDuel. I think he's priced right. Bucky's going to be in every one of my lineups. There's some places where I'm doubling up with him and Rachaad White as well, by the way, because I think White's probably going to get 10 to 12 fantasy points this week also. Like, I really like that backfield against.
Well, what's not to like? They're both getting plenty of volume. That's going to continue without Chris Godwin. It's working well for this team. They're on their way to the playoffs. Why change what's working?
Mike Evans is back, so he'll see some targets, but I think that just takes away from all of the other wide receivers. And it might hurt Kate Otten a little bit too, as people think, but I don't think it will as much as other people want to believe.
I don't think it will either. I really don't think it will either. It's a different set. They do different things. And Kate Otten was still getting plenty of targets with Mike Evans around. So
it's when Chris Godwin was around that he wasn't. But
right. And Godwin's done for the year. So Kate Otten's going to be fine. And we'll get to Kate Otten here in a minute. But first, let's get to the wide receivers. Mike, as I alluded to, a stack I love this week, A.J. Brown, $8,300 on DraftKings, $8,800 on FanDuel. Again, it's this Baltimore offense. Their secondary and their quarterback coverage, it's not up to snuff.
No. And even if it was, AJ Brown's a good play anyways, because I mean the guy has 29% target share in the games he's played this year, right? He missed a few games, but he's very good friends with Jalen Hurts. They're going to be out there playing catch. The Ravens give up the most fantasy points
Yes.
to wide receivers. I know it's priced high, but if you can go low other places, that's a nice stack to have this week. I don't see this turning into the slugfest defensively. Some other people think it potentially could turn into. I like the Eagles passing game a lot this week. Should be a good.
Yes, and the AJ Brown Jalen Hurts stack could be huge. I mean, that could be a contest winner this weekend just against this defense. Now, my mid picks, George Pickens. George Pickens, they're up against Cincinnati. This is a division rivalry. George Pickens is a clear wide receiver one in Pittsburgh. $6,800 on DraftKings, $7,400 on FanDuel. For me, he's my favorite mid-level guy who's going to get volume. We're guaranteed that. Could get a touchdown, could get two against Cincinnati. This is a big game for Pittsburgh. I see him being featured, and I just really like the price.
I like the price. I actually had done a write-up on Wilson, which I don't know if I ever published it or not, but same reason they're going to have to throw the ball against the Bengals to stay in the game. The Pittsburgh's defense is great, and that's why sometimes the passing offense doesn't have to move the ball as much. But the Bengals offense is great too. So I think you're going to have to throw the ball against this team to stay in the game. The Bengals defense is not very good.
They're middle of the road against wide receivers. You're giving up 27.6 points a game. It's 14th worst. But again, Pickens is going to see all the volume. So for me, Pickens is a volume play. Now, my low play is the opposite of that. I've got Jordan Addison, who was kind of left for dead here a few weeks ago. Minnesota's up against Arizona. Jordan Addison's $5,300 on DraftKings, $6,300 on FanDuel. I like him in this offense as a wide receiver too.
He's getting such volume lately. Like it's hard to not like him. I was in on him last year when he was getting the volume as well. It looks like the volume's going to continue. Justin Jefferson even talked about it a bit. Yeah, well, I mean, my job's really to make sure we win, and I'm happy when other players are producing on my team.
Yep.
Right attitude, right? Even though he's a diva, we know he can tear it up. Addison's good, right? He's a good player. He produces when he gets the volume. He's been getting it. So I actually like this call too. I have him in a couple of lineups already. So,
well, and again with Arizona, they're that middle of the road secondary, 26.4 half PPR points per game, 18th worst. Not a bad matchup. And if you look at, they're going to blanket Jefferson. TJ Hawkinson's starting to see more volume too. That's really going to open up Justin Jefferson and Jalen Naylor. If you want a real basement play, just pray for a touchdown. Jalen Naylor had one last week, so I could see it happening. Anything's possible. Speaking of anything's possible, let's get over to tight ends. Mike, I love your first pick because he should be in there every week. Taysom Hill, $5,000 on DraftKings, $7,000 on FanDuel.
It's so funny. Even Andrew Cooper, who hates Taysom Hill, is coming around. He would say he doesn't hate Taysom Hill, but he does because he thinks he shouldn't be listed as a tight end. Love you, Coop. But I've always been a Taysom Hill guy because I just want fantasy points. I don't care if the guy should be a tight end or not. The coach said he's going to be involved more as we move forward. And with Derek Carr back, this is just a really good thing. Both of these guys have made that offense so good that if you look at them the way we do, they are still listed as top 10 in fantasy points against for defenses. But the past 3 weeks, defenses have only scored one fantasy point against them 3 weeks in a row. And it's because these guys have opened up that offense so much, having Taysom Hill back and Derek Carr back. So, he broke the slate last week. That's not going to happen again. Don't expect 46.5 points this week. But the Rams defense is kind of mediocre, right? They're not great. I love him this week. He's going to run the ball some. He's probably going to catch some passes, and with a little luck, he'll throw a touchdown. 5,000 on DraftKings, 7,000 on FanDuel. Taysom Hill.
Yeah, it's a really good deal for a guy who he's a running back, wide receiver, tight end,
Yeah,
right?
he does it all.
The Rams are middle of the road against all three of those positions. They're either 14th worst or worse against the position in fantasy. So he can feast against all of these different elements of this Rams defense. He's my favorite play on the slate at tight end this week, though.
Oh, mine too.
Your mid pick is my second favorite, Cade Otton of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, as previously mentioned, up against Carolina. $4,500 on DraftKings, $6,200 on FanDuel. It's volume.
I wrote this up this way. Who gets to play the Panthers at tight end this week? Cade Otton does. Who gives up the most fantasy points in tight ends? The Panthers. They stink. They're just not good. Noah Gray scored 2 touchdowns against the Panthers in week 12. Noah Gray. Now, I know we kind of talked about him a little tiny bit as potentially like a waiver wire at. Noah Gray's turning it on right now because people aren't covering him. This guy is not a talented tight end, and he's not getting the kind of volume Cade Otton gets. So I know his usage, some people have the fears we mentioned with Mike Evans back. It might go down a little. I can't pass on this. I have Cade Otton in an awful lot of leagues, and I'll play him in redraft where I don't have Taysom Hill, and I'm playing him in DFS here and there as well. I actually have a lineup where one of those guys is my flex and one's a tight end because of their price tags, right? 4,500 on DraftKings, 6,200 on FanDuel. He's just priced right too. He's not super high. Matchups. Yeah. Oh man, the Panthers are a good team to pick on.
Well, and he might not be. He's not going to be that chalky. I think people are looking at what he did last week. He had 1 catch. That's it. They're going to avoid. They're going to avoid him when this matchup is perfect. Now, the low pick, other side of this matchup again here, Tommy Tremble of the Carolina Panthers, $2,800 on DraftKings, $4,600 on FanDuel.
So it's more of a GPP play, or if you want to pay way down somewhere in a cash option, right? Jatavian Sanders is out, and he's been getting some volume, right? So Tommy Tremble's going to step into that role. I don't think Jatavian Sanders is officially out, but the guy was literally rushed to the hospital for his neck last week. Odds are he's not playing.
He was ruled out 3 hours ago.
Was he ruled out 3 hours ago? All right.
He's ruled out 3 hours ago.
Yeah, he's not playing. So Tommy Tremble's going to get those looks this week more than likely. As I said, it's more than likely if you want to pay down somewhere or you want a good GPP play, I like Tremble this week because of that. It's not that Tampa Bay is great in defense in some places, I guess you could say, but they give up the 5th most fantasy points at tight ends. Right. So you're going to see Tremble get used this week. And that price tag, man, 2,800 on DraftKings and 46 on FanDuel. That's pretty damn good, man. That's really cheap.
Yeah. Well, like an average of 12 half PPR points per game is what Tampa Bay is giving up to tight end. If he can even just get to 10, you'll got your money back on that lower pick here.
Yeah.
Speaking of lower picks, we're going to move over to defenses, the least expensive part of your Week 13 main slate decision here. My high pick for this week, Mike, I've got Houston, the Houston Texans. They're up against Jacksonville. Trevor Lawrence might play this week. And even if he does, I still like this. Lawrence hasn't played. I think he's going to be a little rusty. And Houston got to the quarterback 7 times in the first half last week. Jacksonville's offensive line isn't good. They can't stop anybody. That's been part of the problem with this team and with Trevor Lawrence.
Houston Texans defense was scrappy last season. They're scrappy this season. The past 3 games, they have 13 total sacks, 7 total interceptions, 3 fumble recoveries, and 2 defensive touchdowns in that 3-game span. The Jaguars, they don't really scare anybody, right? I mean, they just don't, even when everybody's healthy this season. I like that. I like the Texans D a lot this week. They're one of my favorites to produce.
I just, there's nothing impressive about Jacksonville. I don't like the coaching. I don't really like the way the offense is run. I don't think Trevor Lawrence is that good. And if it's Mac Jones, forget about it. They're probably the best defense on the slate, period.
Poor Mac Jones.
Poor Mac. I do feel bad for Mac Jones, but I mean, look, dude, he's Case Keenum.
He's not that good.
Basically. No, he's not. Now, my mid pick, the New England Patriots are up against Indianapolis this week. It's $2,500 on DraftKings, $3,600 on FanDuel. This is really simple. I'm banking on Anthony Richardson making mistakes against a better defense than he's faced lately.
Anthony Richardson make mistakes?
What? And that's all this is. I think Anthony Richardson makes mistakes. They're just simply not going to use Jonathan Taylor again.
They make a lot of mistakes, by the way. I think they're 12th in fantasy points against for defenses. So they allow the opposing teams' defenses score the 12th most fantasy points. You're probably looking at 8 to 10 fantasy points there, right? Anyways, I think, right? Like, yeah, I like it too. This guy, I mean, in the preseason, a couple of players talked about Anthony Richardson just throwing the ball to a space on the field and hoping his wide receivers go get it. So if you can see where he's throwing it, you can just go get it. He's hasn't improved all that much during the season, at least not from what I've seen.
No, I mean, he's a rushing threat. He's probably a back-end QB2 for me this week in redraft. Now, let's go to the low side here. The New York Jets. They're up against Seattle this week. $2,500 on DraftKings, $3,700 on FanDuel.
Seattle, 6th most fantasy points to opposing teams' defenses.
Yep, 9.1.
Yes, they've been torn up a couple of times too, right? Like a couple of teams absolutely ran it up on them with scores. So I like this call too. The Jets are really good against the pass. I mean, really good against the pass. So we'll see how it goes. I like them. The fear of the Jets I always have is that somehow Aaron Rodgers is going to tear that team apart so bad that they just don't care anymore. I don't think that this week, but that's a good call, and it's cheap.
Yeah.
I have my favorite cheap play this week, by the way, not listed there, is the Arizona Cardinals.
I like that too.
They're very inexpensive as well. I like inexpensive defenses, so I was looking at these. Not Houston's a great play this week, one of my favorite plays, but they're a little more pricey than those other
ones. The Cardinals are $2,400 on DraftKings.
Yeah,
just to your point. Yeah, they're reasonable. We'll call them reasonable.
Well, we don't really want to pay up at defense, right? I mean, unless you made your lineup and you're like, oh, I got 3,500 left, I'll play Houston. I like them this week. That's how I do it. Usually I try to go really low there and try to pay up somewhere else so I can get that like AJ Brown, Jalen Hurts stack in. And
as long as it's not a defense, as long as they're not going to get me negative points.
Yeah. Oh, well,
that's where I get upset for the most part here. We got a couple of.
God, my phone's going off the hook now.
You've got fans, man. What can I say? I want to get to the chat here, Mike, before we get out of here. We've got Tron Force with a question for the week ahead here. He traded Tyreek and D-Hop for Chase Brown. Now he's ready for a playoff run. That's a good deal.
I like that.
I love that. His running backs are now Saquon Barkley, Chase Brown, David Montgomery, and Braylon Allen, which that's a nice little nugget there. Breece Hall's dinged up. So getting Braylon Allen back on lineup's not a bad idea.
Tyreek hasn't been bad the past couple of weeks, but he's not Tyreek Hill like you expect. He's just getting barely into digits. And Hopkins is someone who, when I was telling you earlier before the show, like we look into stuff a little deeper than some people, I was not a fan of adding Hopkins other than as a flyer. Like, don't expect him to be a godsend. I don't know how he's doing today, right? But he's best a roller coaster, and you got Chase Brown for that. That's really, really great trade.
No, it's a phenomenal trade. Then he does have one more question for us here. He wants to know JSN or McLaurin this week in full PPR.
Yes.
Yeah. Either one's a good. Really, honestly,
either one's a good play. Yeah.
Yeah, either one's a good play. Just so in case anybody's watching here and curious about what's going on in the game, Kareem Hunt and Isaiah Pacheco have split the backfield essentially 5 carries to 3. They have 10 yards rushing. Other than that, we've got Travis Kelce with 6 catches, Noah Gray with 2, DeAndre Hopkins with 1 for 34.
Yeah.
So,
well, that's a good one he had at least. But
yeah, we'll take that one. You know what we'll also take, Mike? I'm going to be live here in about an hour and change for the live Q&A tonight with Keith Fleming from Fantasy and Frames. We're live at 6 p.m. Eastern. Pop on over. We'll answer your questions. That's what we're here for. We're actually going to be closer to 6:30 p.m. Eastern. Keith is on his way back from Thanksgiving, so he's trying to make it in time to get home. Then if you miss us here tonight, come find us on Reddit, Last Minute AMA, every single Sunday throughout the season. We start at 11 a.m. Eastern. That's over on r/fantasy football. And next week, we've got a full slate of shows coming up. Now that we are off of the holiday, Mike, you and I will be live on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern for Waiver Wire Live. Check out Herms and I at our new time, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard on Wednesday the 6th. The Optimist Podcast live with myself and Casey. Casey will be live at 5 p.m. Eastern. You guys catching a theme here about that 5 p.m. Eastern time. And then Mike and I DFS live next Friday, the 8th of December at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Oh boy, I will be 10 days away from moving out of my house. Oh, man, when you put it that way, man, I just don't love it. Tron does say thanks for the advice. And always, guys, we're here to help.
Yeah, both
That's
of those
what we want to do.
I lean JSN on the JSN of McLaurin, but it doesn't matter. It's a coin flip.
I mean, JSN's the wide receiver one in Seattle. Don't love the matchup, but I would probably, yeah, I'm with you on that one.
I just lean that way. I kind of might depend on if Brian Robinson's playing. I think he is playing this week, though.
It sounds like he's playing. Eckler is not. So
they can run on the team they're playing against. So I think you're going to see them run hard on that team.
Yeah. Well, I hope that Jeremy McNichols gets some work because I had to fire him up in a couple leagues. And on that note, guys, we're going to get you out of here. Thank you for riding with us. Again, check me out here in just about an hour, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for our live Q&A session for Week 13. For Mike Reedy, I am Nate Polvogt. We'll see you next week, guys.